Hey guys, this video is about receiving financial aid for going to school or going back to school. When people think of financial aid, they often think of extra money to buy books and campus parking permits. This is a misconception, however. Financial aid that does not require repayment is meant to supplement your income so that you have time to attend your classes, whether online or off. Those of you familiar with the FAFSA application for financial aid know it can be intimidating. Most people are simply not going to qualify. But the reality is that two people who have identical financial circumstances can achieve drastically different results depending on what picture they paint when completing the application. Additionally, completing an application erroneously can not only result in failing to receive financial aid, but can be used to disqualify the student from future financial aid programs. While we at fullsales.org are often able to qualify students who have previously been declined, it's really a lot easier to qualify for one or more programs if it's done correctly the first time. Not only to qualify, but to maximize the amount of your award. Let's face it, getting an extra $400 to $500 a month to virtually press play on your laptop and watch a class online is a pretty good deal. So in this video, it's going to be specific to Pell Grants, but we want to make everyone aware that there are many other grants available. FSEOG is one of them. ACG is another. Now keep in mind $750 a month for an ACG, per year, is not a big deal. But we want to point out the ACG simply because there are a number of other grants similar to it, and when you combine them, they can make a significant difference in your standard of living. The SMART grant is also another one for understudies, and the TEACH grant for those looking to get into teaching as their profession. There are also a number of unawarded scholarships and student loans that do not require repayment depending on what your circumstances may be. Okay. FAFSA factors. So when we're applying for these grants, we're looking at basically 4 or 5 different common denominators for all of them. Financial needs, the primary largest common denominator. Student income is based on adjusted gross income, and that's really where most people mess up, and that's why people get declined, is because they simply don't know how to adjust their income. Now, their parents' income is also relevant, and parents oftentimes overstate their expected support for the student. But if you're married, your spouse is also considered a family member, and in that circumstance, that's also an expected contribution according to FAFSA. The household size is applicable if you are a dependent and your parents have other dependents, and the expected family contribution, once again, applies to not only parents, but to spouses as well. Financial need. Financial need is a pretty simple formula, but there's a lot of ways to mess it up. It's basically the cost of attendance minus your family contribution, and that is what equals your financial need. There's a lot more to it than that, but those are the basic nuts and bolts of your application and your future applications because they will be judged by your former FAFSA application. But the terms are fairly ambiguous. Your expected family contribution, for example, could be referring to either your parents or your spouse, or if there was a trust fund left behind for you. If you're planning on getting married, you'll definitely want to apply for your grant before you consider getting married. And if you are a dependent, your parents should consider making any large purchases they are considering prior to applying. They may wish to maximize their retirement contributions as well, because basically we want to make the largest financial need possible, and to sum it up, less is more. Okay, student income. The first thing you're going to want to consider is if you do have an income, you're going to want to maximize your IRA and your 401k, any retirement contribution you can. You're also going to want to deduct for alimony and child support if those apply to you. Now, when I say deduct moving expenses here, I'm really not including that so you'll have an extra $300 deduction against your AGI. Really, I'm just pointing out to you that there are hundreds of little things like that that really add up to a significant difference and make the difference between getting accepted or declined. So that's definitely going to be something you want to look into, are little things like moving expenses, and there's just too many of them to mention in this video. You're going to want to deduct your tuition and fees, and you're going to want to deduct your student loans. Now, as far as your parents or spouse are concerned, once again, less is more. They're going to want to purchase their needs prior to applying. And when I say needs, I'm not specifically referring to staples of life. I'm talking about if they're considering purchasing a car or a home. Those are things that they're going to want to do beforehand. They'll also want to minimize their capital gains. Hopefully, that's a very good problem to have for most people. I don't know too many people that have that problem, but if they're lucky enough to have that problem, that's what they're going to want to do. They'll also, once again, want to maximize their retirement contributions. And they will not want to use trust funds to hide assets. People do try that. There's things you can get away with, and there's things that you can't. Trust funds are one of those things that you just can't. You'll definitely not want to overestimate your income. And most importantly, and I think it's significant for a lot of people right now, is that you'll want to include any capital loss. There are a lot of people in a lot of dire financial circumstances at this time. A lot of people have been foreclosed upon. Those are definitely things that are going to be factored in, and they're going to want to mention that. Okay, what is the expected family contribution? Well, once again, less is more. And your expected family contribution depends on your dependency status and your marital status. To make it more simple or perhaps more complicated, I'm not sure which, as a general rule, people who file their taxes using the 1040 Easy, 1040A, or the 1040 TEL, generally will qualify for these grants. Basically, I think the lowest common denominator of those three forms of tax filing are that the person makes roughly less than 50 grand a year. I think that's what the deal is approximately. I don't remember offhand. But if you file on one of those forms, or your parents do, or your significant other does, there's a good chance you're going to qualify. Unfortunately, people still fail to qualify even who use those forms, primarily because they don't know how to do their adjusted gross income, and they don't know all the millions, or hundreds, I should say, of little things such as moving expenses that add up to a significant difference in the quality of the application. And while students who currently attend college are pretty much familiar with all the stuff that's available to them, people that are returning to school, 30, 40-year-olds who have been laid off and want to do something, are generally pretty much have no idea what's going on, and this video is probably targeted to them more. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay, this is the same as our first slide, but we're going to go over each of these things a little more in depth. Now, the Pell Grant is the most common type of grant that people apply for, but it's a mistake to simply apply for that one. I included FSEOG. It's worth $4,000 a year, depending on how much you're awarded. It's also a very large grant. Some people consider it easier to qualify for. Once again, the ACG, that's included simply to remind people that there are dozens of smaller grants available that you should be aware of, and most people are not aware of them. $750 here, $500 there, $800 there. It adds up. The SMART grant, another $4,000 grant, and TEACH. So unawarded scholarships are another major factor. Hundreds of unawarded scholarships just get fallen by the wayside each and every year, and people should definitely consider applying for them. That's a significant amount of money. It can definitely improve the quality of your life, and it doesn't take more than a week to try and track down the information you need to apply for those. And when we go back to Perkins loans, student loans, things like that, if you're considering traveling, maybe doing some volunteer work, a lot of those loans simply are dissipated. You've compensated through your, I guess, contribution to humanity, And basically, if that's something you're interested in doing, those kind of loans are definitely going to interest you. Whereas normally it's much better to apply for a grant. But there are circumstances where a student loan can be just as rewarding because of the ease of repayment or lack of having to repay at all. At fullsales.org, we're willing to assist any applicants in qualifying for all the financial aid that can be made available to them. Service is free to the public. Don't really know how much traffic's going to be generated from this video, so if it becomes overwhelming, I'll probably take the video down. But go ahead and give us a visit. We will definitely do our best to get your FAFSA applications approved. We'll do our best to make sure you qualify for everything that's relevant to your particular